My name is Max. I am 11 years old, and it's November 6th and
7th.
Okay, 7th, and I'm speaking with
Bob Janesco.
And we met him at Cornerstone, and we are recording this interview at Chicago, Illinois.
Yes.
Can you tell a little bit about your childhood?
Yes.
What were you like as a child?
I was very compliant. I was born in Chicago, and I lived on the south side. I have 2 brothers and a sister. I have an older brother who is like a year and a half older, and my younger brother is 4 years younger, and I have a sister who is 6 years younger.
Wow. Cool.
Okay. And for some my father's name is William. His name William, and my father and mother both have passed away since. Mm-hmm. But my older brother was named William Jr. And as it so happens, you know the story about Isaac having Jacob and Esau, where Esau was the favorite and then Jacob was the one who was... Well, in my family, my older brother, was the favorite. My parents always treated him much better than the rest of us. And it so happened that in my childhood, he got all the good stuff, and I ended up being almost like Cinderella. I had the worst chores to do, the most chores, all this sort of thing. But when I grew up, my family, we were not Lutheran, we were Methodist. And so when we were young, my parents took us to church, and my father worked in the steel mills, and his job required him to work different hours every week. So sometimes he'd be working during the day, and sometimes he'd be working on the nights. And the steel mills were open every day. They never closed. And so there were many times when my father could not be with us on Sunday. And my mother would choose to stay home and make dinner for the family. And so she would leave it to my older brother and me and my younger ones to go to church. And we could walk there, it's like 4 blocks away. As we grew up, though, as we were getting like teenagers and things, my older brother and my younger brother and sister found things to do other than going to church. And I enjoyed going to church. I enjoyed learning about Jesus and God. And it had always been part of my life.
Where were your ancestors born?
Well, my father is from Czechoslovakia, actually from the Czech nation, outside of Prague. My mother grew up in an Iowa farm town, a small town called Washington, Iowa. And her background is basically a lot of different culminations of European stuff, but as a farm girl.
Did you like school, and why not? Why or why not?
I always liked school. I like learning. I think that learning is very exciting. I liked mathematics and science. I ended up being an engineer. And the reality of mathematics, how it mirrored reality and the world and how things would turn out, I found that very true. I continually find the amazement of science and how this world is put together as evidence of God. and how fragile life is, both human and animal and plant life. For example, there's only, a short or a little bit of a difference in the amount of sunlight that we have in the spring when things start to grow, and as they accelerate in summer and in fall, and then things start to die. And so slight differences in sunlight. If this was some other thing, if we lost half the sunlight, every plant on the planet would die. So it's how God has made things. I have 2 children, a son and a daughter. My daughter is a doctor. She's a kidney specialist. And my son is a physicist who usually works on nuclear power stations and nuclear power. And when my daughter, originally, before she became a doctor, was a genetic engineer. She used to, before she was a doctor, used to make what they call gene therapy for cancer research and try to save children. But one of the things that, when she was in school, that she called me up, that she told me a very interesting thing. There is a certain cycle that plants go through that change from sunlight and how they absorb it and live and create carbon dioxide, the whole cycle that they go through. And she says what was interesting about it is this genetic cycle that they go through and they make up, there is no way to break it. Now, she had been studying how to create different genes and chromosomes and things of that nature. And even in high school, and when she was a senior in high school, she went to OPRF. You two may go to.
He wants to go to Fenwick.
Well, my daughter, when she was a senior, her teacher was actually a professor from the University of Illinois when she was at OPRF. And they had their own electron microscopes, and she was studying DNA as a senior. And she had created, for her experiment, she had created a virus. And then she created a serum that changed the DNA of the virus to stop it growing. So she knew a great deal about this even before she had gotten into college. And she was saying that this thing that they use, this chlorophyll and things, how they make green plants, how they live, there is no way that you can break the cycle and start it at some point, and so plants would live. So green plants could not have been made, but had to be created.
Yeah. Do you want to ask another question?
What does religion or spirituality mean to you, and what role does it play in your life today?
Okay.
We could say it from your childhood too, because you said you were Methodist as a child.
Okay. Well, as an adult, as you go through life, you will find that everyone has problems, and you'll have problems again and again and again. Those who believe in Jesus have a certain comfort and a certain help that others don't have. For me, belief in Jesus is life or death, and it is I guess, the basis of how I live. My wife, I met her in college, and she was a Lutheran, and that's how we eventually became Lutheran. I became a Lutheran. But I mean, but it is not just something that you can say I can pick it up or put it down, or I can choose or not choose. You had the choice to choose it, and for me, after experiencing much of life, that it's literally life or death of how things will be. Well, as I said, I grew up in Chicago, and I don't think that is anything so different than wherever your children grow up. We had enough, and it's interesting that my parents, even though that we brought us to church originally, and we were younger, it seemed to me that to them it was more of a social thing, because their friends were there and they'd have different things they would do with them. And so when my father had to work different schedules, and my father couldn't be there, my mother chose, instead of going to church, to stay at home and making dinner. When she could have or should have, in growing up, she should have come with us, or made my other siblings go, and she could have made dinner later. It's like Mary and Martha. Hearing the word is a lot more important than making the food. And we could have eaten the food later. My parents, as many of parents of that age, went through the Depression. And my parents were, in both cases, very poor. In both cases, my father lost his father when he was very young. There was a great disease going on, smallpox and things, after World War I, where my father lost his father, and he had two brothers, and they all died within a year. My mother lost her mother through appendicitis when she was young. And so maybe that lack of always not having made them always fearful. And because they didn't have God in their life so firmly, that they always, even after the Depression, even after they had children, they were always seemed to be worried about having things. Instead of what Jesus said about the flowers of the field, don't worry about what you eat or what you drink. But we were fairly well off financially. I mean, we weren't rich, but we had enough. And when I met my wife in college, her parents also had gone through the Depression, and her parents had to even when we were going together, her parents had two jobs, had to work very hard, weren't as rich, weren't as well off. I mean, they had things, but they struggled, and yet they were always very generous, and they had a very strong faith. And so I think that having this faith is like an example of how to live, because not worried about what you eat and what you wear and things that God will provide. Okay.
What is your favorite memory of your childhood?
I guess my favorite memory as a child is when I graduated from grammar school.